Hello, everyone. This is Madison
And Ashley?
from WiS, and we're here with our very first interview. Today's interview covers the gender paradox in STEM, and we are so glad that Dr. Noelle Cutter was kind enough to give us some time to sit down and discuss this topic. Dr. Cutter, if you'd like to give our audience a brief introduction on who you are, what you do, anything else you'd like to add?
All right, great. So first, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I really enjoyed the chance to talk with a wide range of audiences of all different ages, because I think it's really important for, specifically for my discipline, but also for the role that I play with mentorship with my own students. So thank you so much for having me on. My name is Dr. Noelle Cutter. I'm an associate professor at Malloy College, which is in New York on Long Island. I've been there for 10 years. I was actually also an undergraduate there, so I started my undergraduate career with them. And then I went on and did some research. Actually, I worked in a space radiation laboratory out in Brookhaven, New York, working on the mission to Mars for a few years. And that gave me a lot of really great experience and kind of helped expand I guess just my love for science that I always had. But so I went on and continued to do a PhD in molecular biology from Stony Brook University in collaboration with Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, where I earned my PhD in molecular biology and then did my postdoctoral work at Cold Spring Harbor and was welcomed back to Malloy College as a faculty member, tenure track faculty member in 2011. My work primarily focuses on understanding why patients become chemo-resistant to treatment, and the patients we're dealing with are pediatric patients who have been diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer known as medulloblastoma. And so our work tries to identify genetic markers that might indicate that a patient will be chemo-resistant to a certain type of treatment before we would give them that kind of a treatment. I'm really interested in the way that the body naturally responds to tumors and how autoimmunity works and enhancing our own immune system to fight tumors. That's kind of our new focus area of research. But of course, the times have been very unprecedented. So in the last few months, I had the opportunity to work in a COVID antibody testing lab. So I spent a couple months working there, and I'm kind of excited to welcome students back, hopefully safely and as normal as we can be in the fall. So that starts for me next week. And so yeah, so I really enjoy my primary role of teaching and getting to work with undergraduate students because it really shaped who I am now as a woman in science. And so it's always great to give back to that community.
Yeah, thank you. That's a lot of information we got there. Really love hearing all that. Yeah. If we could go into questions now, I wanted to start off with kind of what your college life was like, basically. So why did you decide to go into STEM? What made you think STEM was the right thing for you?
If I, I mean, I now we were talking a long time ago, but if I think back to when I was in high school, I mean, I always really enjoyed science and math. I don't think I was that weird student who took as many science and math courses as I possibly could. And I really had no idea what I wanted to major in when I went to college. To be honest, I played soccer and I just wanted to go somewhere that I was able to continue playing soccer. And Malloy was one of the places that had offered me a scholarship to do so. And since they were Division II, I thought, oh, well, I can also, work on my studies as well as play soccer, and I might be able to find a good balance there. So I just kind of broadly majored in biology because I figured it was so diverse. And, I loved science, so I thought I would, it was a good major choice. I've kind of very quickly found out that, this major was so diverse. It was very challenging, but it was going to offer me a lot of different opportunities. So at first, maybe I thought I wanted to be a marine scientist or a veterinary scientist, but then I found out there were so many different disciplines of science that I wasn't even aware of, and I really fell in love with biochemistry and research in general. And then when I started to talk to people, I just saw that they had such flexibility with their profession. You could go into education, you could go into more research. It had good options for starting salaries. A lot of people really loved what they did. When you love science, you love science. And so it seemed like the perfect fit, but definitely didn't plan on that. I think growing up, I was always maybe a vet, maybe something in that kind of science and medicine field, but never did I think I was going to go into research and then, education as well. So it's okay not to know. I always tell my students that it's okay not to know. Explore it.
Yes, yeah, I agree. Did you experience any hardships in college due to your gender?
Um, so this is an interesting question. I mean, I think in general, the science and math fields are particularly male dominated. I don't like, so Malloy College, just kind of as a history, was an all women's college for a very
Okay.
long time. So we tended to have more females in general, even when they did start welcoming men on campus. So I wouldn't say I necessarily had a gender bias, but I did find a lot of challenges in the fact that I was kind of the odd person out on the soccer team. I think I was the one who was really interested in science and math and studying, and academics quickly became the most important thing. So I kind of was a little bit ostracized, I think. When you play on a sports team that's very team-based, I always felt like I didn't fit in and I didn't belong. I also found that as I progressed, as I got into some of the more upper level courses, that it was much more of a 50 mix of both men and women. And usually the top performers, or the students getting the top grades in our classes, tended to be the men who were sitting in the classes with us. And then those kind of inequalities increased as I went into more advanced fields. So working in the research lab after college and then going into a PhD program was, particularly male dominated. Um, so, so yes, it was kind of a challenge during college, but certainly it's becoming more of an increasing challenge, I think, as I progress through the field. And if I look back on it now and I think of what faculty members I knew on campus, and men versus women, there's definitely was the inequality of most of our professors were men. It had like one or two female professors, but then the rest were definitely male dominated. So that was something that you could definitely see the inequality based off of those higher up, those faculty positions specifically on campus. And this was in both college and graduate school.
Oh, okay, I see. um, so with that, have any teachers, mentors, peers, etc., shown a lack of faith in your choice of study?
I was always very kind of well supported. I wouldn't want to say lack of faith. Most times, if I told people what I was majoring in, they'd be like, "Oh, that's cute." They don't really either didn't understand it or didn't really put the real world application of what it actually meant. But lack of faith, I mean, I wouldn't say lack of faith. It was just more, I think, of the misunderstanding of what I was doing and my field of study and why I was doing it and why I was so interested in it. But I was really lucky to kind of be supported by especially a lot of female mentors in my life, as well as like family and friends always kind of supported what I was doing, even if they didn't understand what I was doing it. But that's cute continues to this day. It's the hardest. That's probably one of the biggest quirks that really annoys me when people say that, "Oh, that's cute what you do." Because I don't really think it's cute, but that's again part of the inequality I think that exists in being a woman in science.
Yeah, I agree. I think lots of people around me have heard that, something similar to that, and I think that's kind of annoying too as well. Oh, it kind of goes with that question, but who would you think were your biggest supporters in what you do? Or
So
maybe,
So as supporters, and I mean, this is such a key thing to have in your life, whatever your major choice is, whatever decisions that you're making, you always kind of need your little fan club behind you. So I think your supporters always start, as that core group of your family, whether it's your siblings or your parents, significant others. I think those are that's why they're family. They're going to be your supporters, whatever your choices are. But I think, thinking about this question, some of the biggest supporters and the most important ones were the people who were generally like direct supervisors of me, or the PIs of the labs that I worked in, or faculty mentors. So I think one of my first vital professional mentors that I had was a woman in science. She, Dr. Maureen Sands, and I actually still work with her to this day, and she still continues to be a huge role model for me. But she kind of gave me the first what the real life of an actual scientist was like. So she was a research scientist, and she just spoke to me very openly about many multiple hurdles that she had to jump over in her own life. She was a mom, she had young kids, she was raising young kids in graduate school, and her advice wasn't necessarily anything that had to do with science. Her advice was always just real world: believe in yourself, you love science, stay in it, you can do this. It was just, she was always kind of a champion for what I was doing. She really kind of continued through graduate school, and like I said, to this day, she helps me kind of navigate my own career. She just has always been a shoulder to lean on. So having, I think, an important female role model in my life, someone who was actually in the discipline, was huge for me. That really kind of helped address some of the situations that a newcomer might be faced with, some of the politics, some of the negotiations, what it means to be tenured, promoted, all these different things that you don't even think about when you go into a career. And I think most importantly, just kind of life balancing mechanisms that are so important, as a woman, if you want to have a family, and what that means for professional careers. And besides Dr. Maureen Sands, I definitely, I wouldn't want to underscore any of the male role models in my life who also really helped show me that I was strong enough and smart enough to be in the field that I was in. So definitely my graduate school PI, Dr. Robert Lucido, I was with him for 7 years, helping me through the I can't do this parts, and telling me that I could still enjoy life. And he used to I really loved being in his lab, because every Friday he made it a point that we would stop work at 4 o'clock and we'd all just get together, have a snack, have some drinks, have some snacks, and just unwind and talk about the work week and just let it go, and have some fun, have some friendships, and that was also an important lesson. That's kind of the whole life balancing part of it. So mentors are really, really important. And I think that without them, I wouldn't have been guided down the career path that I'm on now.
Yeah. Oh, what great advice. Yeah. Great insight on that. Thank you. Next set of questions will be done by Madison.
Okay, great.
So my questions are more towards your career right now, like post-collegiate. Do you experience inequality in regards to promotions, pay raises, anything like that in the workplace, or do you feel like it's indirect?
So I think that, one of the issues that I find first and foremost with women in science is people tend to view us in a masculine field. I think for the longest time, a woman at the bench in a science role, it was particularly very male dominated. So a lot of these STEM fields are, masculine. They would kind of, I guess, attribute all those masculine traits to it. And so if you're a woman, you're either having to try to be likable or try to be masculine, but no way could you possibly be both. So I think as far as like advancements in terms of promotions, pay raises in the workplace, this balance becomes particularly more challenging for women. Research has shown this. There's very good published research out there that shows in general STEM jobs are paid less for women than they do for men in the same fields. And so we might have the same titles, the same jobs in the same industries. And if we control for all other, outside impacting factors, the wage gap, the promotion gap is still persisting, and it's really left unexplained by anything other than societal biases and discrimination, and that's really, really unfortunate. Personally, in my own experience, you know, I think I've kind of been on a decent trajectory where I came in as an adjunct faculty, and then I was got the full-time position in a tenure and promotion position for assistant professor, and then went up for tenure and promotion to associate, and I never had an issue with any of that. Um, and honestly, if you would have asked, if we would have had this interview a year ago, I would have been like, that didn't really affect me. I know that it exists, but that doesn't really affect me. But I do have to say that in the last year, I had decided that I was really interested in going into more of a leadership role. I thought I wanted to kind of go into administration, maybe a deanship, and I started to set my eyes on a position like that. And probably for the first time, very bluntly in my life, I was told that, oh no, you'll never get a position like that. You know, you're not going to be able to do that. That's not a place for women. That's not a trajectory path for you. And so I think for the first time in my life, I really was hitting a wall as a woman in science, that these biases and these discriminations do exist. And unfortunately, I don't think it's so, you know, with my personal experience, and that was not even coming from male or masculine discipline. That was coming from another woman who was very insistent that I was not going to be able to progress or go any further than where I was in my current position, which in my mindset, that's you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to work even harder to do it, because that's just kind of how I face the world. But you know, certainly that these biases do exist. It's very unfortunate. And until recently, it hasn't really impacted me. But as I've been doing a little bit more reading after I knew I was going to be coming on and talking with you young ladies, it's kind of sad how much, how women in particular really have to wrestle with these inherent biases that exist. And when they exist, a lot of times a whole societal mind shift change is going to be needed to fix it. And I think that it's going to be really a struggle for equal treatment. And, you know, I hope that not only myself, but other people in my position can really kind of implement some better standards to ensure this equal playing field, through application, through the interview processes, through when a woman gets a position, and kind of that mentorship through her entire career. It doesn't stop when you get the job. I think it's a continual process.
Have you had have you interacted with women in similar fields and shared experiences, or been able to relate to each other, or not?
Yeah. So you know, I went to graduate school with some pretty amazing, powerful women, and I continue to interact with them, and just women across the field, because you know, you stick together, especially when you're few and far between. But I have a lot of wonderful, incredibly bright female scientists that I'm friends with, and coworkers that, you know, we can relate to on so many different levels. But one common thing that I see with women in STEM, and I get this all the time, and probably also because I'm a petite person, so a lot of times people don't really know how old I am, or they think I'm a lot younger than I actually am. But I always get the "you're not the one who's in charge" thing. So you know, a lot of people say that, especially if you're in a leadership position or an administration position, that you know, you're mistaken for staff or for someone maybe in a lower position, because they just can't believe that you're the doctor, or you're the one in charge, or you're, you know, in that leadership position. You know, and that's an unconscious bias. So I think those are the hardest ones to fix. A lot of women that I've spoken to, and I can totally relate to this, is I think women in general feel a lot of pressure that we kind of have to do it all. And, you know, we have to be the great mom, you know, we have to be the PTA mom, we have to be the one who's going to all the kids' practices and dance recitals or whatever it needs to be. But then we also need to be on the career path and, you know, get into a leadership position and get promoted. And so I think women just kind of face so much pressure to be the best at all of those different things. And it's really hard. It's really hard. I spoke a little bit before about this, but the idea that, sometimes you give a talk or you talk with people and they just give you that, oh, that's cute. Oh, that's so cute what you're doing. And that just drives me up the wall. I think, no, it's not cute. It's important and you should listen and we need to do something about it. And it's almost like they just stop listening to you and it's just all about what's on the outside and not really about what you have to say. So I get really offended when to be called cute in that regard when when you have something important and meaningful to say. I think the hardest thing that women in science face, and I mean this is definitely the hardest balance that I face, is this idea of misunderstood motherhood. So I always knew, before I knew I wanted to be a scientist, I knew I wanted to be a mom. I knew I wanted to have a family, I get married, the house with the white picket fence, that was definitely part of my, what I wanted to do. So I think that when you are finally at that age where you're married and you're ready to start having a family, you're often always, either just finishing up maybe your graduate degree or just starting into a brand new faculty position. And so that was my biggest challenge. I was pregnant with my first daughter when I was an adjunct professor, just finishing up my dissertation. And, no one tells you how hard it is to be a mom and how much of a life change it. Even they tell you this, but you don't really experience it until you actually experience it. So we often have this: women choose to have a family or a career, and it's almost like you have to choose between both. And so, and I wanted to have both. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be a great mom, of course. And I wanted to also be successful at my career that I was just starting off on. So I think we kind of get questioned on our commitment to either one. So we're either failing as a mom or failing in our career. So again, that goes back to that. There's just so much pressure, I think, as a woman to be able to spin all the tops. I often give a talk, and I always start off with, I feel like in my life I'm spinning tops and they're all on fire and you just don't know which one you're going to drop first. So I think I'm excellent at multitasking, but it's really, really hard to find the balance sometimes. I think it's, in science, you're never sleeping anyway, but then to add motherhood on top of that, it becomes very, very difficult. So forget about having hobbies and stuff. That goes right out the door. And then this whole idea, again, I spoke about it a little bit before, but the idea that women, especially when you get into more leadership positions, that you're seen as being more masculine, and you've lost all that feminism that women are supposed to have. So I think that sometimes, especially when you have to be in a leadership position, that you can't be well liked and you have to be more masculine. And I don't think that's true. I think women have so much to give to the workforce, and the way that we solve problems is so different than men, and both mindsets are valuable, not just one. So those tend to be the most common trends that I see, particular for women in STEM.
Have you ever had a time where you doubted your abilities because of something someone has said, even though you're successful?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a pretty confident person, and when I tend to put my mind to something, I generally achieve it. I don't usually set out on things that I don't think I'll be successful at. So, just to use a personal example, I was never a very good swimmer. I could swim, I grew up, I learned how to swim, but when I lost a bet to my husband, who's a very good swimmer, and it was to do a triathlon. And I was like, I never wanted to do a triathlon because I wasn't a good swimmer, but I decided I was going to train for it, and I did it, and I was so proud of myself. And then, 2 years later, I'm signing up for an Ironman, which is the triathlons of all triathlons. So this idea of confidence is what I do. I'm a pretty confident person. If I put my mind to something, I generally tend to be pretty successful. and if somebody tells me I can't do something, it makes me want to do it 10 times more. So I love those sort of challenges. But I think, again, playing that fine balance of you want to be well liked at work, and then you can't just kind of go in there and be a big bully. I think as I've moved up in my position, I'm sort of at a teetering spot where if I move into leadership, I'm finding a lot more obstacles than maybe I had previously been challenged with before. So it's, whether it's talking specifically about maybe moving into more of like a leadership role, for me, I'm interested in moving into like a deanship. Um, it's it's become more evident that people are starting to doubt my capabilities, and that kind of double competency of, well, she just does too much. She's a mom, and she'll be too committed to being a mom, and she's not competent enough to be in this position. So that kind of entire experience has been pretty challenging. um, I think people in general seem to think that women can't do both. You can't have a career and you can't be a mom. But I think that you can. I think that there's a lot of highly qualified women in science, and they're also great mothers. And I think you can be overly committed to what you're doing at work and then come home and be a great mom. But I do think that it's become challenging as I've moved up the career ladder, especially this last year. Faced with the crisis that the world is seeing as well, it's been a challenging year.
Overall, how do you think this paradox of discrimination has affected you?
I think that there's so many biases that are, those implicit biases that people have in their minds about women and having to look a certain way or having to act a certain way, that you just get that kind of double pressure. You have the pressure of, looking pretty and fitting in at work and wearing the right clothes. And then the pressure of, does she make lunches for her kids? And, is she spending enough time with them? And the pressure of, is she focusing enough on her research? Is she putting in all the hours to get her work published? So I think there's just that we're being judged on so many different levels, and we can't just put our heads down and focus on one of those things. We're trying to, especially for me, I'm overly influenced by the world around me, and trying to make everybody happy. I always want to make everybody happy, and sometimes at the expense of my own sanity. And it's I think that's how it's most profoundly affected me, is that you sometimes get some self-doubt, or you get tired, or you spend too much time worrying about what other people are thinking about you, rather than just focusing on the task at hand.
What advice can you offer for incoming young females interested in the STEM field or any fields in STEM?
Awesome. I love this question. So, our world, if anything, especially during this pandemic, the one thing that we've seen is that we need more scientists, and we need more people going into all of these different STEM careers. There's just not enough. There's just not enough in general for people working in these areas. And I think right now, especially so many young men and young women especially, we have this untapped pool of people, women, minority students, and they just really need to be encouraged and told that they can have a very fulfilling life in science. Um, I'm a firm believer, and this is going to go into my education background, but I'm a firm believer in the research done by Carol Dweck, who she talks about having a growth mindset, so that intelligence is something that is changeable, it's malleable, and it can be developed through effort. And that's opposed to something like a fixed mindset, where it's something that's an uncontrollable trait. So science, that's all that science is. It's a growth mindset. It's knowing that what you know now can change, you can grow from it, you can learn from it. And I think that despite the face of adversity that we might be faced with, especially as women and young women in the field, we can still be successful, and you can still persevere in STEM. Um, there's lots of intellectual skills that can be acquired. students should be praised for all different types of efforts that they put in. And I think it's also important to understand that there's struggle, but with struggle comes the learning experience, and that's how we move on from it. One of the other things that I think is important to know is that I think in order to improve STEM education as a whole globally is we need to offer these opportunities to diverse learners. So this idea that education is not just focused on math and science. Education as a whole encompasses the sciences, but a broad range of learning across the curriculum. So things like the humanities, the arts, natural sciences, social sciences become so incredibly important, especially for this global world in which we live. If we think about solving the pandemic of COVID-19, it's going to take more than research and science to solve it. It's going to be, what does the global response look like? Are we reaching the people that need it the most? So all of these tough questions comes from those diverse set of skills that you have across the curriculum. So I'm a huge believer in a liberal arts education, that it's not just the sciences and math, but all of the studies, humanities, arts, natural and social sciences, that are super important. So if we're talking about success for the future, especially some, what might call an uncertain future, we need to address some of these compelling issues that we face here in the United States, as well as part of a global community. And regardless of where you study, what major you're in, what your career goals may be, this idea for like a globalization process, this idea of a diverse curriculum and education of the whole person is probably the most important thing to me. And I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years, just kind of engaging myself in what it means to be in this global world of science, and everything that we need to do to make medicine a global enterprise and not just treating the people who have the most money. It's really important now, especially with everything that is going on. So that's my best advice.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cutter. I love that question as well. And hearing from you today, it's very nice. That concludes the questions we have for you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as we have.
Absolute pleasure.
Really appreciate you taking the time to share this information with us and those keeping up with WiS. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here and, share whatever I could. So happy to do so.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.